Welcome back to Public Policy. As you already know, I have decided during the weeks when you have a midterm assignment and a final paper due, I will not be giving you a lecture expecting you to add that to your plate. I think it is more important what you are doing in studying and practicing public policy, advocacy, and mediation in our complex simulations. And that means, because I've decided to do this course this way, that I have to be selective in what I do say to you when I lecture. I hope you don't mind, especially there's at least one of you that is also taking the community conflict class. I hope you don't mind if today I talk very briefly and ask you to watch an interview that I originally taped for the community conflict class. The reason I have decided to do this, even though we have, selective time, is because our NCRP alumni and adjunct faculty, Jomana, is a policy analyst for the city of Los Angeles. And in my last lecture to you, I talked to you about my experience with including government at the negotiated rulemaking mediation table. I think even though she is talking about her work with the Human Relations Commission, and so she works with hate crimes, interfaith relationships, public policy other than environmental policy, you are still going to get an inside look into her world and how government policy analysts think. Now, I hope you have all had basic political science. Maybe even in high school, you were introduced to the complexity of the American democratic system. It is important to have a picture and an understanding, at least a basic understanding of that system for our course. Because even though we are focused on federal environmental mediation and public policy advocacy, policy advocacy and public policy occurs at all levels of our government, city, county, state, as well as federal. And we as Americans deliberately created this system to provide checks and balances. Frankly, with our current federal polarization and deadlock, much more, as I have mentioned in earlier lectures, is likely to be happening at the state, the county, and even the city level with public policy. And all of you living in communities are well aware of how these local policies affect your day-to-day life, your day-to-day choices. I mean, this is part of a democratic complexity. It is in contrast to the oversimplicity of polarized, overly, when I teach theories, I talk about overly simplistic dichotomous thinking. Win-lose, my way versus your way, my way or the highway. This is the entrenched polarization that we see today, and I will talk more about this next week. For today's lecture, I would like you to notice a couple of things. One is Jomana admits, and Jomana has actually taught public policy conflict. She and I both teach this course. She actually tries to broaden it so it doesn't focus narrowly on environmental conflict as well. Partially, I imagine, because environmental conflict is some of the most contentious, polarized conflict in the world today. But what she honestly and openly admits is that government officials, government bureaucratic staff, public policy analysts, legislators, they often believe that they know better than the rest of us, than the communities that they are tasked with serving. they may lose that sense of community connection, community service, unless somehow they are asked to engage with us, with the communities they serve. She admits this. And she also talks about how trust is such an issue in community government dialogue, negotiation, mediation. Just like for those of you reading the environmental mediation text, Lucy Moore talks about trust as a core key issue. And look at our polarization today and ask yourself, how deeply do you trust government officials, staff, even public education? You know, including California State University, Dominguez Hills, has reached a point with its bureaucracy that we can be critiqued the way the Starbucks founder is now critiquing education throughout the United States. That bureaucratic staff, official and leaders, have created such a self-serving bureaucracy that they set up barriers that actually inhibit and hurt serving the students who fund them, who they are tasked with serving. There's conflict going on here. And so as you're listening to this interview, I would like you to consider, what would it take for you if you were invited to, let's say it's an environmental NCRP process, what would it take for you to actually trust the government staff and officials at the negotiated rulemaking table, at the mediation? It's one of the most fundamental questions that needs to be addressed in these processes. And I appreciate Jomana's honesty and her willingness to give us an inside picture into government today. Now, in a couple of weeks, I do have enough lectures that I would like to talk a bit about our ability as community to initiate these NCRP processes. In fact, I would say all of you who are educated in NCRP have a responsibility post-graduation to share what you've learned as much as you can. Because, you know, I think we historically have depended on government. We created government to serve us when churches, if you read the history of social work and government, when churches were not able to do enough for the most, destitute, for the vulnerable, children and elderly, to protect us. We created government, but now in the polarized world that we live in, it's in a way we have not matured as citizens and communities to say, what can we do to ensure that our needs are met and that government is truly serving our needs and interests? Instead, we are attacking, scapegoating, polarizing the situation. When the truth is, and for those of you who, like myself, and I know a few of you at least, have lived abroad. I have recently spent half a year in Brazil and have spent as much time in India as well as several weeks in the West Bank. Of course, I've traveled to other countries, many. But for extended periods of time, I've lived in these countries that simply do not have the infrastructure of the United States, that simply do not have the democracy that we are privileged to experience. And I, for one, would like to see more of us showing the polarized communities how we might walk in the middle and figure out ways to preserve the best of our democracy and infrastructure. I want to continue the best of this country. I'm not interested in, privatizing communities and eroding, attacking the public to a degree that I am not protected as a woman, that we do not have individual human rights, that we don't have a constitution. So that requires walking in the middle with NCRP. Okay, enough said from me today. I would ask that you now view, sometime during the week, my interview with Jomana. Have a great week.